My ex-wife, Diana, and I have 3 boys, a teen, a tween, and a younger tween. We divorced pretty much after the youngest was born. We also both remarried. She married Christopher and got a divorce last year after 7 years of marriage. I'm still happily married to my wife, Jessica. Christopher and my boys were pretty close, and they were bummed when the divorce happened. I always got along with the dude. A few months after the divorce, Christopher disclosed that the divorce was over his being diagnosed with cancer, and Diana, not wanting to be his nursemaid or responsible for his medical bills, checks out. He told me this because he wanted to leave whatever he had to my kids. Unfortunately, he had no family of his own. Obviously, I said, of course, and signed the paperwork. A few months ago, I got a call from a social worker saying that Christopher was a few months from dying and unable to care for himself. He gave her my number. They needed someone to help with end of life. He had made me his power of attorney. He was living in a county hospice, and my wife and I moved him into our home because he deserved to live his final days in dignity. It also taught my kids about compassion. Unfortunately, he died after 2 weeks. My wife, myself, my kids, and a few of our friends are planning to spread his ashes at the beach this weekend. Diana asked if she could attend, and I told her to kick rocks. She wanted nothing to do with him when he was dying. I'm not saying Christopher was a burden, but it's really sad that this dude had to reach out to his ex-wife's first husband as he did. It was clearly more her responsibility. I said she couldn't sit there and let us do all the hard work, so she could come in at the end as the grieving widow. My older son thinks I should have let her come, and I told him to mind his own business and mouth. I'm not going to sugarcoat your mom for you. Your mom is a witch and would be treated the same way she treated your stepdad. Am I the idiot for banning my son's mom from a memorial because she divorced him for being sick and didn't lift a finger while we were taking care of him? Edit. He left them $10,000 each. He requested half go to a charity and the other half be used for something fun. Some of it will be saved. His social worker said it's quite common. She even has cases involving children who are dying or sick with no family around. There are people whose hobby is to go to memorials for people who die alone. Not the idiot. Your ex is an absolute ghoul to divorce a man for having an illness. That's the most polite way I could phrase this. It's terribly sad. One matter is not having family at all. Another is to be divorced because you're dying. How can you abandon a person for that? Not having your ex-wife around at the memorial is just a form of respect for the dude. I have a genetic mutation that causes me to be at high risk for certain cancers. And as a single woman, one of my greatest fears is being abandoned because I get sick. I disagree. You are the idiot. Oh, not for excluding Diana from the ceremony. That's probably for the best for everyone else, and for her. But I told him to mind his own business and mouth? Your mom is a witch? Way to talk to your son, who's showing compassion in a matter that very much is his business. OP, you're a role model for your sons. You show them what kind of men you want them to be through your words and actions. You've just demonstrated extraordinary kindness to a man in his last days, and then undone all that with your comments about their mother. Keeping things factual is fine, but it's still his mom, and he's just a kid. He clearly cares about her since he's pleading on her behalf. There were kinder ways to tell him no, and your reasoning. And oh Lord, caregiving is awful. My grandmother died just over a year ago, and I watched my mother take care of her. It's soul-draining work. Diana might have known herself well enough to know she couldn't do that. I'm not saying that you should welcome her with open arms and include her in the ceremony, but treat your kids with the compassion you're trying to instill in them, and don't degrade their mother to your children, even if you think she's behaved badly. I 100% judge her. If they had gotten divorced on paper and she lived her vows, that's one thing. But you don't get to nope out when things are hard, then parachute back in and play the bereaved widow. He shouldn't have silenced his son, I agree, but his son needs to hear what he's saying because Dad believes his mom would do the exact same thing to any of her children as he did to her ex. He wants his oldest to guard himself from that. I could see where that's a hard conversation worth having. She betrayed her vows. She's a witch. End of story. The kids should absolutely be made aware of the fact that their mom is a horrible human being. I have 3 kids, a young grammar school age, a pre-tween, and a tween. Their dad left when the oldest was 5 because we weren't worth the stress. I was terrified because we were about to be homeless, but I managed to find a job. I hadn't seen my family since they cut me off for getting pregnant as a teenager, but my older brother found me and made me move in with him and his family. We live in their basement rent-free, and it's more than enough. I feel a little awkward around his wife and kids. He has 2 pre-tween daughters, but they're always nice to me and my kids when we see each other. Well, it was my brother's birthday yesterday, and we were all upstairs having dinner. My brother left the house to go get something, so he wasn't home for a bit. My son accidentally spilled juice on himself, so I took him to get cleaned. He then got all worked up and tired, so I quickly put him to bed. My daughters also came down, and I sat with them until they slept. After all that, I was going back upstairs and heard sister-in-law plus nieces talking about me. Did she really get pregnant at 15? Yes, and look how she ended up. She's lucky your dad is so kind, because you know she was pretty much homeless before we took her in. You guys better not get pregnant. I don't want you to end up like her. I mean, my situation is pretty pathetic, and I'm indeed lucky my brother found me. So I was going to ignore her. But then she started telling the girls my entire life story. Again, okay, but she was telling them some embarrassing details and making me out to be a horrible human being. She told them I did drugs while pregnant. Not true. She told them I probably have mental illness X and X. I don't. And she told them I was probably going to abandon my kids or give them up if my brother hadn't found me. Her kids both went, "Oh yeah, I can see her doing that. She doesn't seem entirely there." It hurt to hear how poorly they thought of me, and I regret telling my brother and sister-in-law what happened to me. I know I'm not a role model and probably should be ashamed of myself, but I didn't think they thought so lowly of me. I just went to bed and thought about ignoring it, but now I'm wondering if I should tell my brother. It's childish and petty of me, right? I feel like it'd be petty to go crying to my brother about his wife and kids. I don't know how I can look them in the eye anymore, but I don't want to risk being kicked out. Am I the idiot if I told my brother what they said and potentially started a fight or argument, or at least stressed them out? I already know I'm being too much living with them, so I don't know. Edit. I've been saving to move out and get my own place for me and my kids since we moved in. It's not a secret either. I just got my certifications to get a better paying job, so it shouldn't take too long now. I know I made stupid mistakes. My stupid 15-year-old self thought no one could love me as much as my ex, and I trusted him because he let me move in with him after my parents kicked me out. I regret believing him every day, but I had no one else since we ended up moving hours away from everyone I knew. Not the idiot. I will not sugarcoat it and say you had a great life, but advising her daughters and insulting you are not mutually exclusive. Tell your brother if you feel like he would understand. If this could affect your living conditions, I would suggest to bite your tongue. Try to ignore her. Don't do it. What will it achieve in the best case, realistic scenario? And worst, you leave your kids homeless. At best, everyone gets uncomfortable and it becomes a point of contention later, even if they apologize now. Your feelings are hurt and you want to do something that I get. I don't get potentially blowing up your lives over one person's stupid or misguided thoughts. More so when you admit there's a reason for them to think those things and you don't have many options. Is it possible your brother exaggerated to his wife how dire your situation was to make sure she accepted you into their home, to ensure she had compassion for your children's situation, since your own parents weren't an option? I wouldn't discuss this with anyone and doubt your sister-in-law made it all up herself. Keep your children's best interest in mind and swallow your pride. Be grateful for the help, and even with your hands full with 3 kids, consider any way you can create a bond with your sister-in-law. I lost my first husband when our children, Calla, 24 female, and Hawthorne, 26 male, were 6 and 8 years old. I remarried 4 years later. I met my husband a year after losing my late husband. We were friends for several months, dated some, stronger feelings developed, and I introduced him to the kids to see how they would get along. We halted for a year while my kids and I did some therapy because their reaction to my husband was strongly adverse because they didn't want to replace their dad. But once therapy was ongoing, they were doing better. From there, things moved faster, but the kids were on board for things to move on. They were clear, however, that my husband would not be filling the role of a dad in their lives. My husband said he was okay with that as long as he was respected and they could work toward being a caring family. Calla and I were always close, but she was a real daddy's girl. Losing her dad was extremely tough for her. She formed a nice relationship with my husband, but it comes nowhere close to her bond with her dad. From the age of 12, she and I became much closer. My parenting style, as well as my willingness to talk about her dad, even after I remarried, made me someone she felt she could be open with. She was 15 when she told me if she ever got married, she would want me to walk her down the aisle and for us to do a mother-daughter dance instead of a father-daughter one. I told her we could dance to the song her dad used to sing to her. She said she loved this idea. Even though she seemed to mean it, I always assumed things would change when she got older. I figured she would choose to walk alone or with her brother as a representation of her dad and their close relationship, as well as for the societal expectation for a man to do it, or with her husband. But when she got engaged 3 weeks ago, she immediately asked me. She brought up our past conversation and told me she wanted precisely that. I told her I would be honored. We cried tears of joy together. I told her that her dad would be so proud. My husband took the news in a way I didn't expect. His first question was whether I suggested she ask us both to do it, and I told him no. Then he asked if she considered asking him, and I said I couldn't answer that for her. He asked me if I thought of him when I said yes. He asked whether I thought about all that he's done for Calla, for both kids, and that he's still not looked upon as a fatherly figure all these years later. I told him I didn't think of him when asked because I was overjoyed. He told me I should have given him a lot more consideration, and I should have tried to compromise with my daughter. I thought he would change his stance, but now, 3 weeks on, he feels I was wrong. He told me he felt he deserved more from us, especially me. He said that I'm his wife. I should ensure he's respected and honored for his contribution to the kids' lives. Am I the idiot? Edit. He's not contributing financially to the wedding. Ignoring everything else about his entitlement and total idiocy, you should ask him, why are you more worthy of respect and honor in Calla's life than me? Does he think you don't deserve these honors? Misogynistic traditions, blah, blah, blah. Not the idiot. This is a ridiculously happy and exciting time for you and your daughter, and your husband's making it all about himself. He's one of those guys who thinks he did the single mom and her kids a favor with his presence, and he's been waiting all this time to collect on what he's owed, right? The girl considers him a father figure, or she doesn't. Nobody's saying he didn't contribute, but what kind of honor is it really if she has to be strong-armed into it? What meaning would it really have? Is he really grasping for such a shallow honor? But I guess the fact that it's meaningless is irrelevant once everyone gets to see how respected he is. It's his wedding after all. The selfish daughter trying to make his wedding all about her is gross. Am I right? What a man. What a dad. I cannot imagine. I'm my daughter's bio father, and I'd be gutted if she asked her mom to walk her down the aisle when she got married, but you know what? I'd pretend I wasn't. It's not your day, not your emotions. It's all about me, me, me. Your husband is dead wrong. This isn't about him and all he's done. It's about Calla. She lost her dad, and while the grief fades a bit over the years, big events bring it roaring back. At least that's been my experience. Her wedding is going to be bittersweet. She needs her parent, the one she's always had, and the one who loved her dad, to give her away. I'm surprised that you expected Calla to change her mind. She's not responsible for his feelings. You aren't either, OP, and I'm glad you accepted and did not try to offer any alternate suggestions, thereby ruining the moment. I'm 27 female, mixed, and if I had $1 for every time someone asked me about my ethnic background, I'd be a very rich lady. Normally, when someone asks me where I'm from, I just tell them the general area I reside in. However, oftentimes their question is inevitably followed up with, "But like, where are you really from?" I work in a field where I luckily don't have to interact with others much, but occasionally, my boss insists I join him for lunch with some hotshot client. So the other day, I had a semi-formal lunch with him and one of our biggest clients this year, a very important person who brings the company a lot of money. At one point, the client asked me where I'm from. I tell him what area I currently live in. Of course, he asks me again where I'm really from. I tell him I was born in this country. Then he said, my exotic looks tell a far more interesting story. I honestly couldn't believe my ears. I decided to troll and told him that my mom gave birth to me on a roller coaster and that my life has been going up and down ever since. I added that getting asked where I'm really from is always a low point. My boss intervened very quickly and apologized to the client on my behalf. He said that I didn't mean it, and I said that I definitely did mean it. Surprisingly, the client laughed and apologized to me. The rest of the lunch went fine. Afterward, I had a chat with my boss, who said that my behavior was incredibly unprofessional, rude, and shockingly childish. He said that I not only embarrassed him, but the company at large. I honestly didn't care for the conversation and simply replied that I have the right to answer stupid questions like that, how I see fit. He said that we all have to say or do things we don't like to keep the peace, and that it was simply a compliment. He also said I'm lucky that I left a good impression on the client, otherwise he would have taken further action. Am I the idiot here? I work in a field where, luckily, I don't have to interact with others much, but occasionally, my boss insists I join him for lunch with some hotshot client. This is the first thing I noticed in your story. Why does your boss insist that you join him occasionally when a client is a hotshot? Unless you're hot and your boss just wants to show up with eye candy, that would explain the exotic question. Yeah, I'd bet money this is the answer. And the real idiot here is the boss for putting OP in that situation. The exotic question was peak cringe, but it definitely would have been wiser to take it on the chin. It sounds like the client took your response with good humor, so I presume he was asking with insensitivity but not with malice. You're totally justified for poking back, but your boss doesn't have your back, and it's the problem. It sounds like he's one of those guys who would let a client take a dump on him for a juicy commission. Well, OP, you have the right to answer that question in any way you want. Your boss has the right to fire you if you cost him the client. Sometimes standing your ground is worth the cost, and you get to decide when that is. You are the idiot, but now you won't have to bother going on any of these client lunches anymore.